So now, do you have a hypothesis account?
I do not.
Okay.
I hadn't heard of it until yesterday.
So it's a really nice tool, and a lot of people are using it really extensively. And I just, well, but it's free, it's open source, and it's built in. It now is available in Blackboard.
Okay, cool.
And which makes it really easy if you want to use it for students. There's some trade-off. Well, we'll go over all that. but basically, if you do it in Blackboard, it automatically creates a Blackboard group. So all the students are in it, and then any annotations are stored just within the course. So they don't have to create their own account.
Cool.
For some purposes, it's better to have students create their own personal accounts if they want to grab resources out on the web and annotate them and share them. And then they pretty much need to do that because in Blackboard, they can only access things in Blackboard, typically PDFs you upload. You connect it to your Google Drive account, you create a folder with it, and then share that and just put in the link for it. Of course.
Yeah, I use YouTube quite a bit for my classes, so this sounded pretty cool. So I'll sign up for it now. So I got that.
Getting a little ahead of ourselves. This is sometimes used across faculty. There was an open syllabus project where there were faculty talking about course development using annotations of syllabi that are posted publicly across the country. And they get together and they have meetings about these things and look at the annotations. People have used it in place of discussion forums, where instead of having a Blackboard discussion forum, you have people just post annotations and comment on each other's comments and so forth, which can work fairly effectively.
Discussion.
It's used to annotate materials, to gather materials, and you can tag and collect them. It's used for peer feedback quite often, where if you have students doing some writing, it's a nice way of having them add annotations and comments on each other's work. You can have comments on the whole document, or you can have comments on specific blocks of text or materials, at least on PDFs.
It only works on Chrome, is that right?
There's plugins for pretty much any browser.
Okay.
It works nicely in Chrome, and there's a plugin you can add to it, which I'd recommend. If you're going to use it a lot, the plugin's kind of nice, so you don't have to keep opening, a separate window for it. This is down a little too far. Okay. Speaking of which, I should log into my account, make sure I know, because I have it in plugins everywhere. I don't always remember it. Okay.
I got one of the fancy new clickers.
Oh yeah, those are really nice.
Laser pointer.
Yeah, I lost one, and we didn't have any more of them, or at the time we didn't have any. So I just bought one on Amazon because the laser pointer makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I was kind of bumbling back and forth between the both of them all semester. I was like, oh my gosh, this.
And because it's radio frequency, you can be anywhere in the room without having to worry about aiming it or anything else. even just to advance the slideshows.
Mhm.
So.
I really did enjoy the clicker, and the students provided quite a lot of feedback on it on the reviews too. So
They liked it?
yeah, they did.
Good.
So I guess it made them feel empowered.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it gives them a voice, and you know, you get to see how they're all doing. Everyone in my department now, except maybe one person, uses clickers.
Okay.
In at least one class.
Yeah.
Mostly introductory classes, but I use them in my upper level econometrics too.
There's a little bit of resistance in my department just because of the having the devices out. I don't have a problem with it, but it does cause some distraction every once in a while. But
Oh, it works, yeah. But you know, when I was in college, I found plenty of ways to distract myself without requiring a
What?
But yeah, smartphones are tempting.
But yeah, if it's not that, they will distract themselves with something else. So.
Yeah. And it's also a good indicator of how engaged they are. And if you see them getting really distracted, then it's time to change things up a little bit. Or, you know.
Yeah.
Now, you say that, it doesn't always work in practice in large classes, but. Okay, well, it's time, and I don't see anyone online, but we'll get started. So what is Hypothesis? Basically, it's a web annotation tool. In a lot of ways, it does the things that used to be done by Delicious and Vigo. You know, so it's a nice way of just marking up or annotating things on the web. You could use it to store bookmarks so you can access them from anywhere. That's what Delicious and Vigo are both known for, basically. So that if you find an interesting website or something useful, you can tag it with any of these apps, and then you can add, well, you can grab it, store it, and then you can put it in categories and add tags to it to make it easier to retrieve. So in that sense, it does the same sort of thing as those do, but what's really useful about this is that it's becoming more ubiquitous. It's catching on with more and more people, especially in academia. And it lets you create groups really easily. It's integrated with Blackboard, Canvas, and other course management systems. And there's plugins for pretty much anything. And when you annotate something, Vigo and Delicious let you create and add tags. And I think they both let you put in some short annotations. But a really nice thing with Hypothesis is you can mark up web content. So you can go to a website, you can block some text on the page, and then you could add comments that specifically refer to that block. So you have the ability to either annotate portions of a document or a PDF or other content, or if it's a Google Doc shared as a web page, you can annotate that, as long as you don't have editing rights to it, which became a little bit of a problem when I tried to use it, because if you have editing rights, you can only add comments to a whole document, not to specific markup, because the content might be changed, so they don't want them. So if you're someone who might be changing the content, you can't mark it up because that content itself may change. So that's one restriction, but there are ways around that, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But you can either add, and when you make comments, you can make them public so that anyone in the world can see them, and that's an option on this. Or they could be set so that they're private, so only you can see them. Or you can set them to a group, and you can create as many groups as you want. And a really common thing is to create either a whole class group, or if you have students working on group projects, you could have groups for each individual group as well as the class as a whole. And it's a really nice way for students working on projects to share resources, to share links, and to share feedback. And you know, you create your own tags for it. And here's a link to it. I'm not even sure what this does anymore. I didn't prepare for this as well as I should have, but let me just check. It may go to a resource page which actually doesn't exist because I saw we didn't have many people signed up. Let me just see. Oh no, this just takes you to the Hypothesis website. You've already been there, so it gives you the option of basically actually joining the Oswego Open Pedagogy group. So that is a group I put together for people on Oswego. So if you if you want to scan this, it will take you to Hypothesis and let you join a specific group. So if you'd like to try it, you can do the same. We just started, we're talking about Hypothesis, which is a web annotation tool, which lets you basically mark up content on the web. And it's used a lot for class projects, for peer reviews, for collecting and annotating resources, and so on. So I'll wait for just a second. So just scan that in, and it should invite you to a group I created for the last time I did a workshop on this. It's the Oswego Open Pedagogy group, because this was part of the workshop on open pedagogy.
Hi, John. This is Mamta. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. I didn't see you come in. Yes. So,
Yeah.
so
yeah, sorry. My question is, how do I do it from home? Like, if I have to scan this barcode, or is there a website that I can go to?
if you just hold your camera up to the screen, it should be able, as long as you're not watching it on your iPhone or your Android phone, you should be able to use your smartphone and just aim it at the QR code, and it should take you right to a website that will let you sign up for Hypothesis. And if you don't have an account, if you do have an account, it will take you and invite you to a specific group in Hypothesis.
Okay.
Which we can share in the workshop.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let me leave the meeting and come back on my computer in a minute, just so that I can scan it, because right now I'm on my phone. So maybe I can do it through my computer then. That would be much better, right?
Yeah, I didn't share a short URL. Let me just double check. Oh, well, there's a URL. Let me put this in chat. Let me just hop out for a second. And
okay.
Should let you do it from within the phone, maybe.
Okay.
And I will open the chat, which should be, which is where I know this stuff. There we go. Oops. I didn't leave my, let me move this out of the way, and here we go. Chat, okay. So this should pop up in chat now, and you should be able to get to it from that.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, found it. Thank you.
Okay, and then once so this should allow you to join this particular group, which I'm signed in here too. And one of the things I would recommend is that if you're doing this with, whatever browser you normally use, add a plugin for it. You can get a Hypothesis plugin for Firefox, for Chrome, for Edge, I think. Maybe for Safari, I'm not sure, but most people tend to use it with Chrome. It works pretty well with that.
Oh, no, I didn't bring my time typing it in.
Oh, sure. I think it's right here. There we go. It's a long URL, so. And did that let you join that group?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay. You have it, Bill?
I screwed it up.
Yeah, so it's group/vjvkz-oswego-open-pedagogy. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'd suggest is now just find an interesting website. Just hop out, go to a browser, and that may not work quite as well on a smartphone because I don't think there's any plugins for mobile devices. That may have changed, but the last time I looked, it was not. Although you could always grab it and do it over the web on a mobile device. But just grab one and save the URL. Just grab that, and if you have the plugin installed, you can just click on the plugin and save it from there. If you don't have a plugin installed, you can go to the website and add the link directly in the website. So let me just try that myself. Let me just go to, let's say we wanted to go for, I know there's this podcast site here. So let's say I wanted to grab that, and I could grab that, and I could plug in, when this thing gets out of my way. Come on, get out of the way. I could go to hypothesis, and I could just go here, and I should be able to add that. Well, this lets me, well, we can do it from here, and we can go here. Well, there's already annotations on the site. And now I can annotate it. So you can look at the, well, I had put an annotation up there, but you could then visit annotations, or you could leave your own. I usually do it through a plugin, so I'm not used to doing it from the website directly. But here we go. Okay, so here, once you get to this, you have the ability to, you can either add a page note, which refers to the whole thing, or let's say we could take a block of text like this, and once we have the block of text, we could annotate that block of text. So it's a nice way to mark up comments. And this is one of the ways in which this is used. If you have people doing, if you have them reading an article, they can take a block of the article. If they're reading a poem or something similar, they can just highlight it and leave a comment on it that they could share with the class or with the group. So, and once you do that, let's say, I'm going to leave this one private, but let's say I want to go in here and I must be logged in. Oh, I thought I was logged in. I am logged in. Okay, so in any case, yeah, I am logged in. I don't know why I said that, but I'm going to make this specific to this group so that it should appear in there. And you know, you could add your own page notes or whatever, or in this case, an annotation. And this is getting in my way all the time. Okay. That's not working as well as I thought it would. I should have been able to put a comment right there. Annotate. I clicked on that. And oh, yeah, I have to click on the edit button. Okay, so let me do that again. Let's say I want to block this, and then I click on the annotate button, and here's a comment field. Okay, so this is a, I'll just type some garbage here because that's only shared with you guys, but you know, you could then, if this was a class group, that comment could be shared with everybody. And then I will, you can add tags to that, and the tags could be videos, for example, or it could be creating videos. You know, whatever tags are useful to you or for your class. I had students, for example, working on creation, let's say. I had students working on a book, and there were certain keywords that I had them create for each of the chapters, a separate tag for the chapters, and then for subtopics in their individual topics when they were working with the group on that chapter. And they just tagged the content there, which made it easier for them to find things when they were actually writing. You know, because you can do this for journal articles, working papers, any PDFs on the web or any websites, etc. So, and they could mark it up so they could make notes about what they wanted to talk about or why they found it useful, and so on. Yes?
Okay, so the first website I tried said there were no annotations available.
Right.
This one too, there's no annotations, match my search.
So you should be able to create one though. So if you go over to it, you should be able to, if you have hypothesis open, if you go over to the hypothesis tab, you should be able then to add something. Well, if you search for it, okay, when you search for it, you should be able to block text and leave comments at least. So yeah, you're in there. Oh, open it in this window.
What do you mean?
So, so click on search there.
Oh, on this
So
one?
do it from there, and yeah. How did that work? Okay.
So let's say I go to,
See, if you have this on the browser, it's just something in the corner, and you just click on the browser thing, which
I mean, I suppose
probably
I could
shouldn't
use
have
my laptop and maybe.
It's a whole lot easier when it's installed as, and I encourage students to do that too. But you should be able to, once you have that open, you should be able to leave tags. Let me see. Yeah, so it shows up as a sidebar here once it's opened. It should be anyway. So then there's two options. This is where you could, well, you can turn off the highlights or on. And here you have a whole page annotation from there, which should have come up when you were in that window. I'm not sure why it didn't. Or you could just block a section of text and either just highlight it or annotate it. And with the annotation, you would add some tags and type something there. And you've got a little simple editor where you can do boldface, italics, and so on. And you could add links to your notes. So if there's something else that's related to it, you could add a URL that links back to it, or things you may want to explore a little bit further. So I'm not sure why you're not seeing that.
Yes, I tried these two pages, but toolbar.
Which browser are you using?
Chrome.
Okay. It should.
Well, so let me ask you my second question too while I log in here also. In that, it's open, Oswego Open Pedagogy, right? So
yes, that's the
that
group
is
that
only visible
right.
to
It's
us.
only visible to people in the group.
But if you made it public,
Then anyone who goes to the page would be able to see any public annotations, right? So if they had Hypothesis opened, if they have it as a plugin, or if they open it, when they go to that site, anyone would be able to see any annotations on that, which is a nice way to share comments and so on, or at least with other Hypothesis users. And if you have students annotate documents, when you go to the class group, you'll be able to see each annotation from each user, as well as a list of all the tags that they're using. So you could click on the tags and see which specific students posted things in that or provided annotations. And you could also see, you could do it by user, or you could do it by the tags to see what's out there. And then you could click on the links and it would take you back to that document. So for example, if I go back over to the Open Pedagogy group here, let's see, we had, there's not a lot of posts to the group either. So let me go to a different group. Let me go to, well, here was one I used last semester. I should be able to see all their comments. Let me close that. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing more. I may have used a different account. I looked at this before and there are all sorts of things. What I would suggest, though, again, is that you install the add-on. I should have prepared this a little bit better. I'm not used to doing it this way. And I don't know if we can add the add-ons on this machine. No, because it's managed by the organization. Yeah.
So I added it on my laptop.
And then you should see that if you click on the Hypothesis symbol in your add-ons, you should see this as a sidebar wherever you are. And this is where you would look at the annotations and so forth. But what I don't understand is why I'm not seeing all of my annotations, at least for this group. Is it only doing it for this website? Maybe. When I opened this up before, I had a whole list of dozens and dozens of annotations. Let me see if it's over here. Let me see if it's here. So if I go over, there we go. So if I go here, here are some annotations I have used in the past. And if I go to the groups, I should be able to see annotations. There we go. This is what it should look like on that page. I think what was happening is it was looking at annotations from those groups on that page, because this isn't the way I normally interact, and I should have checked that before doing this. But so here, for example, students were working on a book project. These are annotations organized by the chapters. We ended up doing it in a slightly different way, so that's why there's not too many of them. And here is by specific keywords. So I could look at the skill premia and find that there's 2 things that are tagged. Then I could go to it and I can see what specifically had been tagged. This was something I happened to tag and share with students as an example. But we could look at tags by individual students, and there's just not any in this. I'll explain that in more detail later. But here are the chapters I worked at. So here there were 8 tags on this one, where there was some feedback that students were giving to each other, and so on. So the problem, the first time I used this extensively in a class was last spring, where I attempted to. One of what my goal of using it was I had students creating a book. They chose to do that as a project. They were working in groups, 10 groups of 3. So there were 30 students jointly authoring this book. And I wanted to provide them with a way where they could give feedback to each other, where each group every other week had to provide feedback to the products of 3 other groups, and that rotated throughout the semester. And we were doing the actual writing in Google Docs. It turned out because they all had edit access to those docs, Hypothesis could not work except for page comments. So we just ended up moving to Google Doc comments. But now to see a better way, which I had been trying to get for about 10 months before they enabled it, it can be installed in Blackboard. And finally, in the last 3 days of the semester, they installed it in Blackboard. But now it's installed for everybody. So what I'd like you to try doing, and this I think is a really effective way if you're going to do peer reviewing, is to go into Blackboard and choose a self group just to show how this could work in principle. The problem I had, as I mentioned, was that if the students have edit access to the documents in Google Drive, and because they were all in shared folders where they could all edit each other's work, we couldn't do any markup in it with Hypothesis. It has to be a web page or a PDF, but it can't be anything that students directly can editable from within Google Drive. So what I did is I saved all their product. What I intended to do and what I will do next time is I had each of them, and you go up to community and choose a self group. So community and then self. And then go to content, and there should be a folder here called the Hypothesis Workshop, just to show how this works. And the way this works is you just add in, when you go to the menu of things to add, you add a specific URL. So what you can do is the workflow that I will be using when I next do this type of thing is I'll have students create the documents in Google Drive. I will save them as PDFs, which is really easy to do, store them in a Google Drive folder, and then you can add each of them as a Hypothesis link. And if you go to this link, you now see that there's, if you click on this, what you'll see is the actual item is a Hypothesis link where you automatically load Hypothesis on the sidebar, right there. So if you create a Hypothesis URL, instead of just adding a URL, you create it as a Hypothesis URL, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment, if I don't screw that up. And then students can annotate each other's work. So they could, again, they could just copy something, but that's not what they were doing. Let me try that again. Did I pop out of that page? Oh, because that was T for teaching. I was using it as an example. That was probably not a good thing to do. Let me hop out of there so it looks like something different. Let's say it's a PDF. There we go. So this is a paper that I had written with Larry Spizman and another guy. So here you can go in, you could mark up something, you could add comments, you could add feedback. etc. And so if you have student work, you save it as a PDF, you let other people add comments, and then you can keep track of it by looking at all the comments for a specific document or from specific users if you want to evaluate the quality of their feedback. And it's a really nice way of doing peer review, for example.
So, and they all have to have hypothesis accounts
No.
to be able to do it?
That's the cool thing.
Okay.
If you want to have them go out and comment on things in the open web, they have to create their own accounts, and you can do that within Hypothesis by creating a group and sharing a link. The way you added that group was from a URL that is generated in Hypothesis. So one thing you could do is if you want them to comment on things on the web and annotate web content more broadly, then create a group, invite them to it, but then they have to create their own accounts and they have to add themselves to the group, which is not hard. It didn't work for what I had intended to use it for in the spring. But if you do it from within Blackboard, when you add a hypothesis link in Blackboard, it automatically creates a group that is private to members of the class, and it's tied to their login. So they don't have to log into Hypothesis, they don't have to create an account, and the limitation is they can only comment on and annotate things that you post within Blackboard. So it depends on your purpose. If you want to have them go out and find things and tag them or comment on them and leave feedback for each other on things on the open web, they need individual accounts. If you want them to provide comments and feedback on a specific set of documents, which could be peer reviews of each other's work, it could be a paper that you found online and that you save, because it's basically a URL. It could be something. It will take things that you have stored in your Google Drive and share them as hypothesis links, or you could just put in a URL of anything on the web, but you're basically controlling what they're commenting on. But it's easy. So
Can you annotate that right there just so I can see what it looks
so
like?
yeah, so and this should work on yours too. But
okay.
if you just grab a block of text, so you know, let's say let's block that, and we will choose annotate, and we will say, you know, like, what is this crap or something. So you can basically just leave that, and that'll be posted to the cell group. Maybe I don't want to do that, but yeah. So maybe like who cares or something. That might be better. And we'll post that to the cell group, and now that'll be in there for anyone who clicks on this document. They'll be able to see comments from anyone in the class sorted by their user ID.
How do they have a user ID if they don't actually have an account?
Because they're logged in, so it'll be the net ID.
But if you post the hypothesis link in Blackboard, they can open it and they don't need an account, right?
They don't need a separate hypothesis account because it's essentially using their net ID from Blackboard.
Oh, okay.
So you can see it by their user IDs from within Blackboard, and if you open one of these, you can leave comments on any one of these documents. And they could either be whole page comments, or you could just block a specific text. So if you go over here, you can put a page note, which is just a note on the whole document. So it could be an overall review, it could be feedback about this, it could be a note to them about how this might be useful, or whatever you want it to be. But if they want to comment on specific block, they can put it in, and again, they can add their own bullet points, a numbered list, etc. I think they can do some math. That's something new.
They don't need the hypothesis plugin either.
They don't need anything other than a browser. So this is built into Blackboard, and that's what makes it really powerful. But it's constrained. It's constrained to only things that you choose to have them comment on. And some people use this as an alternative to a discussion board. So you just post a document and have students comment on it. And then they can comment on each other's comments, and they can follow up comments by adding new comments on the same block of text. And then you could look at the thread in here instead of, you know, the threaded discussion. And so that's something that people will sometimes do.
And so it's not live. I had to go back out and go back in again, but now I see your comment and my comment. Maybe you have to refresh the browser page or something. Okay.
So it may just take a little bit of time to get to the server or whatever, but I think it should show, and you may have to refresh the page, but the way I would use this, and the way I intended to use it last year, but it took extended learning people 11 months to do this, when I gave them the one line of text they had to insert to get it active, but there were some issues about whether it was appropriate to do that, and with something new and different, and whether they'd have to support it. But basically, in order to do this, it's really, really simple. So if you ever want to do this and have students comment or annotate a document, all you have to do is go to add content, and then in here, unless they've removed it, there should be a hypothesis. Oh, maybe some new tools. There should be, yeah, there it is. It's a hypothesis tool, and you just put in whatever text you want to appear. So this would say, let's say sample, sample document 1, and then you would put in a description of it, and you would, and then what you would do is you'd save that, you submit it, and then the next step, you would go in and hop to it, and and then you have the option of either finding a URL. So it's 2 steps. You first create the link, and then you link it to the content you want students to comment on. So let's say we want them to comment on, let's say we want to have them comment on the Oswego website. So we could just grab the Oswego URL here, and that could be what they're going to comment on. And so, come on, one more time here. So we're just going to enter a web page, and we can do it right there and submit that. And now this is what students would see. They wouldn't have the ability to do this, only the instructor can add those links, but that now will become part of this. So sample document 1, if I click on it, will now take me to the Oswego website with hypothesis open on the sidebar. So, and there it is. And now students can go to any part of this. They can either leave whole page annotations on the whole thing, or if there is a page with text on it, let's say we want to go to academic maybe, if there's a page with text here, they should be able to just block something, click on the annotation, and now you can make annotations about anything at all on that site. And if people click on that, it will take the particular site on the Oswego page. So if you want to have students go out and comment on each other's documents, you just upload them as PDFs to Google Drive or as individual documents, and that works perfectly. If you want to have them comment on a working paper online, or just some summary, or a blog post, or a website, or I don't know how it would work with videos. You could leave, I don't think you'd be able to do any annotation except maybe in the descriptions of the video, but you could have them watch a video and leave page comments on that. Then you could just scroll through those things, for example. You can do the same, that sort of thing with Blackboard, with a Blackboard discussion forum, but the really nice thing here is the ability to mark up text and choose a block of text and leave feedback on it, which you could then, this is only kept within the class, but if they're using their own personal one, they could choose to make it public, share it with their class, or just keep it for themselves. So, at the very least, you can always use hypothesis just to keep track of interesting articles you find online, where you tag them with keywords. If you're working on a number of potential research projects, you choose keywords for those research projects. You click on the link, and it shows you the whole set, just as Delicious and Digo do. Delicious disappeared a few years ago, and pretty much everyone switched to Digo, which is what I still use mostly. But this has the ability to do more in terms of annotation, with sharing it with groups more easily than most other formats.
So I have a question actually. Does this actually help you with the with kind of like grade center too?
With what?
Let's say I'm doing a peer review. And would the grades populate themselves in the grade center? Whatever grade I've given them for their annotations?
So if you want to do this where you were grading the work, say if you were going to have students leave feedback, you'd have to create a standalone column in the gradebook and provide feedback. In the specific application I did is I had students create a draft of their chapter, for example, and or actually first an outline of the chapter, and then I had them all give peer feedback to each other. This would be an easy way of doing it, but then I would have to go in and look at the feedback they were providing and assign them scores individually. Now, in fact, I did that, and what I did is I shared a rubric with them in terms of how they were evaluated. I'd look at the comments. We were using Google Doc comments at the time because this wasn't enabled in Blackboard. But I'd look at the comments, and in a separate window, I'd fill out the rubric and assign a score. So this is not directly tied to the gradebook. That's an additional step, which is one advantage of using the Blackboard discussion forum if you want to grade students on their contributions.
Yeah, no, thanks.
It's most useful if you want to have them commenting either on each other's work or commenting on things in the open web, but you have to use a different version of it for that. So the open web version of this is the most powerful and the most flexible, but it does require students to create their own accounts and to join the groups if you want to evaluate them on it. But again, if we go back, if let's say we wanted to join a group, that's pretty straightforward. So if we were in here and we click on groups, you have the option of creating a new group. And let's say I'm going to create a group, let's say for Echo 312, which I won't be using this in. But all you have to do is click on create a group. And once you created the group, you have the option to invite new members, and you just grab this and you can send it as an email to everyone in your class. Tell them to click on the link, and if they have a Hypothesis account, it will invite them to the group. If not, they have to first create an account, and then they'll be members of the group. And then you may have to remind them to join the group if they haven't done it right away, if it's going to be something you're going to use as a class activity. But you know, there's a lot of things you could do if you have students go over some theoretical concept, for example, in class, or in that week's assignment, you could have them go out and find some news article that addresses that, and then you could ask them each to submit it by adding an annotation or a comment in Hypothesis. You could do the same thing in Blackboard discussion forum too, where you have them post a URL. But this is something that a nice thing about the external individual ones is that anything they annotate is theirs indefinitely, so they get to keep it when they leave. The Blackboard discussion forum go away after the class is over.
Well, and also the Blackboard discussion forums, every new thread, like you can't read
it's harder
them.
to
You
follow.
have to go in and read, and then when you go in to grade them, it's never in the context.
Oh,
it's like, so you have to read, I read them twice.
And then you have to try to figure out, it's not an easy format.
Yeah.
Angel was a little bit better there where they had the branch structure.
Right, yeah,
But,
so you could kind of follow through the.
But here you can click on each student to see it just as you do in Blackboard, or you could click on the specific page to see what everyone said about it, or you could use specific tags to look at what people were finding on that topic. So when I was going to do this with the class before we just switched over to Google because we couldn't get it working in Blackboard at the time, what I was going to do is have a tag for each chapter and then subtags, as I said, for each of the subtopics within that, just to make it easier for students to organize their resources and for me also to see what they were finding. Also, make it really easy to monitor how much they were doing in terms of finding resources, because you could click on any student's names to see everything they had tagged, you could click on any of the chapter names to see what was done for the chapter, or you could click on any of the tags to see who was posting there and the quality of the content they were posting.
So I see that what you're doing is you are posting articles and students are annotating. And I guess that's more useful for 300, 400 level courses. How do we do that in 100 level courses where they use a textbook and I can't post the whole textbook online?
Well, they would have to be using an OER textbook, which if they're using an OER textbook, that's a good way of doing it, in fact. In fact, some people have used that as a way of getting feedback. Some instructors who have written their own textbooks will ask students to use Hypothesis to provide them with feedback and questions so that you can go in and see what students have marked up. And students, if they're reading it, can post a comment right there, and then you can respond to their comment to answer their questions about it. So if there's something that students find confusing, as long as it's online in some format, you know, a digital format, they can mark it up and send you questions about that specific content. So that actually gives you more possibilities if you're using a digital version of the text. And
right.
for people who use OER materials, that'll be more useful as a tool, potentially.
Yeah, all the more reason why we should be using more digital material and OER. But I see it as being used pretty well in all of my classes, actually. And it seems like to be a good tool where, you know, students can be made accountable for whether they're reading their chapters or articles or not. If they're annotating, that means they're reading, basically. So this can be part of like a participation credit, or some kind of credit can be given to them for this activity.
Well, I have a question then. So if a student is using the electronic copy of a textbook, right? So not an OER, but just an electronic textbook, they might be annotating within.
So they have the choice. They could make annotations that are for them that they can use to look up certain things by keeping it private. But if they shared it with a class group, then they could share questions and comments with everybody.
But would people who don't have the electronic version of the textbook be able to see, like, because then you're essentially also sharing your textbook online, right?
Yeah, we can't share our textbooks online either. Even if I have an e-copy of it, I don't think I can share it, right? The copyright laws.
That's a good point. It depends.
Yeah.
It depends on whether everyone's linking to one online PDF or whether it's delivered. If it's coming from a publisher, you wouldn't be able to do that unless a publisher has that tool built in. If you're linking to something, say, on Lumen Learning Candela platform, then everyone's looking at the same ultimate web content, and they could annotate it so anyone else could see that.
So was that platform?
Lumen Learning, if you go to lumenlearning.com.
London Learning?
Lumen Learning.
Oh, Lumen. Oh, Lumen. Okay.
Yeah. They have one of the largest collections of OER textbooks out there, as well as some adaptive learning tools, adaptive learning and personalized learning. And that anything in that content, because it's stored on the web, could be annotated, and you could look. It could be annotated specific to your class if you have a class tag, and then students could go in and save comments or questions, or you could ask them to read this chapter and make some comments about it, which could be whole page comments. You know, it could be something like a 1-minute quiz where you ask them, after they've read this chapter, what questions do they have? What did they find confusing, or something similar? It does partly test that, or you could ask them to highlight and mark up things that they don't quite understand, so you can focus more class time, or just respond to them. But that wouldn't work if you were using a publisher where it was delivered into Blackboard through separate links. But if you're using free materials, most of them just reside on a specific web server or a bank of web servers, but they share the same URL. So this would work pretty nicely with that. And there's a lot to be said for free textbooks.
I don't use textbooks per se, but so I do know some of the students get the electronic version of the books that like the monographs that we use. So I don't know, but yeah, I'll look into it. I mean,
I haven't used a lot of journal
articles
in probably 10 years, so I've been using e-text for a while now.
Right, yeah, but we use a lot of journal articles.
So yeah, you have the option. There's some legal issues, but you could put them all on Google Drive and store them in a document, but there is copyright issues. But if it's online, you could just send them out to the link and have them annotate things on the web.
The copyright issues, everyone gets one for personal use, so I'm just sharing it with all of them for their own personal use.
I kind of feel the same way.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things I use are working papers that are
Especially with closed just to the group.
And if you do it within
Oh.
Blackboard, it is kept closed just to
Right.
the group, which gives you a little bit more coverage in terms of
Right.
what is the Teach Act, which gives you a little more flexibility in terms of coverage. If it's something that goes through, what's the big group that we're negotiating with? Elsevier. If it goes through Elsevier, they wouldn't want you to do it, but more and more journals are providing preprint access to faculty, and more preprints are being posted. So you can get the preprint versions of the articles, which are often identical to the final versions, other than maybe the page numbers, for most journal articles now. And if you haven't used it, scholar.google.edu works really nicely. And then you can just find the URLs of any text versions of those articles and share them with the class. But and again, it's really, really easy to share any of these things. Yeah, if you log into your own course site, all you have to do again in Blackboard is, oops, that was back in here. This thing keeps popping down. Sorry about that. So all you have to do to add something new is, again, you just go, we'll cancel that. You just go back in. So, oops. You just go back in. Oops. One more time. You go to the content, we'll hop back in there. And it's as simple as clicking on tools, clicking on hypothesis, clicking on Pearson. Kind of defeats the purpose of OER. But you just click on hypothesis, and it's really simple. You just give it whatever text you want from peer. You could put a little description in the article, or that telling students what they should do with that article. You could give them instructions on what types of comments or feedback they should use. And then you just click on it a second time and you add the URL. Or if you give it permission to access your Google Drive, and that's how I'd be using it, because I create class accounts for each of my classes where they're doing some group work or shared work. And I just create a folder for everything I want them to comment on, save them all as PDFs in there, and then they're able to comment on all the documents. And they like the fact that they can easily do this. I showed them how it would work, but it didn't work because they all have edit access. So it's kind of tricky if you're using Google Drive and Hypothesis, where the students, it just doesn't work is what it amounts to. I try to find ways of getting it to work. The only way in theory you could do it is by creating another folder where none of the students have access, and then publishing all of it as a web page and getting the links to them as websites. And that was far more work than this, because with this, all you have to do is either put a link to the document, or you just save it in a folder in Google Drive and give them access to the whole folder as a URL there, and then they can comment on any of the documents within the folder. And that takes seconds, for a couple of minutes at most. So that's all I got. It's a nice tool. I wish I was a little better prepared. Yesterday was a little hectic. I was picking up a candidate last night, and then I was working on some other things until about 2:33, and then I was up at 6. So I'm not as well prepared for this as I was earlier for the first couple of sessions. But play with it. It's fun. Install it on your browser, and many people swear by it. I still use Deco a bit because I've just gotten used to that, and I got thousands of tags in there. But if you're just getting started with a web bookmarking type tool, this is a nice one, and it's free. You don't ever have to pay for it, and it's open source, and it's increasingly widely used, and it's used an awful lot for open pedagogy projects, where students will be remixing content or finding content. I know Robin DeRosa uses it when she's created these anthologies, had her students create anthologies, because it's an easy way of students leaving comments on work and feedback for each other on their work and so forth. And it's a nice way of finding resources and discussing them and so on. So that's all I got.
All right.
Any questions or?
No song and dance.
No. But you can link to websites where there are, and you can have people leave comments on this. So,
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
okay. Mamta, any questions or comments? Sorry, I was a bit more disorganized today. I'll be better.
No worries, no worries. Actually, I just wrote a comment for you. I said, I see this tool being used in most of my classes. So this was very helpful. I really appreciate this workshop. I will play around with the tool quite a bit, and I see this being used in my flipped classes more than face-to-face, because in flipped classes, you know, they're supposed to be reading, and what they generally do is summarize and ask questions in a Blackboard post. Now they can do it over here through hypotheses, and they don't need to write a whole post for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Just share each individual thing as a hypothesis link.
Right, right. And even in 100-level classes, what they can do is, if I give them something, small articles, you know, general articles to read, they can do kind of like tag some key concepts, and I can make a whole list of that key concepts, and I know that they have gone through these key concepts and they're pretty good with this chapter or, you know, this article. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.